Hey there, and welcome to the Event Crushed podcast. Each week, we'll be chatting about all things wedding industry, entrepreneurship, and how to crush it in life and business. I'm so glad you're here. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, happy Friday, and welcome back to the Event Crushed podcast. This is your host, Becky, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I interviewed Adrienna with Ava and the Bee, and Ava and the Bee is a boutique wedding marketing agency for wedding pros and educators, and Adrienna just has a ton of knowledge on many topics, but particularly SEO and marketing and blogging and branding and all of that good stuff. So during our conversation, we really discussed kind of the basics of SEO, and then we kind of dug a little bit deeper into why SEO is important and why, as wedding pros, we really need to be focusing on it and not, just putting it to the back burner. So if you are someone who has wondered about SEO and how to make it work for you and what the importance of it is and why you should prioritize it, then this is a really great episode for you. And I think you're going to learn a ton from Adrienna. So with that, let's welcome Adrienna to the show, and I hope you enjoy the interview. Adrienna, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm super excited to talk with you and to hear all that you are going to share with us about SEO.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I love this topic. I also know whenever you use the words SEO, vendors' faces kind of like deer in the headlight. So I'm really excited to break it down as simplistic as we can today.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's something that it's one of those things I think people think they know enough about it that they're like, yeah, it's good. I don't really need to deep dive into it. They kind of have a basic understanding, but from what I found, it's usually not enough to actually get them results. And there's more to it. So I know that you are just a wealth of knowledge in this area, and I can't wait to hear what you have for us. But before we jump into all the fun SEO stuff, I would love if you would just share a bit with my listeners about your background in the wedding industry, and then how you got to owning your marketing agency for wedding pros, Ava and the Bee, and just kind of your story, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I've been in the wedding industry since 2009. I actually started just making accessories. I dreamed of being a milliner, a hat maker. So I used to make hats for Kentucky Derby and weddings. So that's kind of how I got my first wedding bug, as they say, was I was making accessories. And then to, pay for college, I started working in bridal shops. So that's when I really understood my passion of sales and marketing, was working in a retail environment, which is very emotional, and you have to sell to a complete stranger right in front of you. I did that while I was going to art school. And then my senior year at SCAD, I met a wedding planner, and we had this crazy idea while I was still in college to open a wedding planning, floral, and bridal boutique. She was a planner. I had retail knowledge. We both worked at David's Bridal, and long story short, we opened it, and it was really fun, and it was exciting, and I was young and had all of the energy in the world. And then in 2017, I hit burnout. I just got really, really burned out and decided to sell my part of the business, and did not have a future. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was kind of just floating in the world. And then I just had a lot of friends who were in the wedding industry. As you know, when you're a vendor, all your friends are vendors because you can't hang out on weekends. Everyone's at the bars on a Saturday, and you're like, I'm at a wedding. So your friends are vendors.
Yeah.
So they started just hiring me to be a virtual assistant for $30 an hour. They're like, can you do this? Can you do that? And the answer was, well, yeah, I can definitely do it or figure it out. And then in 2018, pretty much within 6 months, I was fully booked, quit my full-time job, and have been doing it ever since. And we've worked with over 276 as of today wedding vendors. So
wow,
a lot in the last 6-7 years.
Yeah, that's incredible. So Can you tell me a little bit about the story behind the name Ava and the Bee, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I get asked this all the time because my name is Adrienna. It's technically not Ava. So Ava is just a family nickname. And funny enough, I chose it because for SEO, I knew no one was going to be able to Google Adrienna. So this just ties into my SEO love, is I was like, no one's going to know that. And then, so I went with Ava, and then B kind of ties in a few things. First, my cat Brutus. I call him BB. So B for him. And then I went to SCAD, and the alma mater is a B. So I was living in Savannah at the time. And so the B was just like a serendipitous thing for me. And that's the name. It's pretty much me and my sidekick, my cat.
That's awesome. I love it. And I love that you had, SEO in mind when you came up with a name, which I think a lot of people, when they're coming up with their business names, they don't think about that at all. And then it comes back to bite them in the butt sometimes. So you were very forward thinking in that, which makes sense for your industry that you're in.
Yeah, you have to really think about it. We're actually having a client right now where they have a similar name to a competitor in this space. And it's a little tricky sometimes with the names if we are competing against the same words.
Definitely. My gosh, so interesting. Okay, so let's just jump into everything SEO. So I think most people are familiar with the term SEO, search engine optimization. But for anyone who maybe just doesn't know kind of just the basics of it, I would love if you could just lay it out for us. Like, what is SEO and why is it important to us as wedding professionals?
Yes. So, quick story of why I think this question is so perfect is one of my favorite Facebook posts, and I post it every year on Instagram whenever it comes up in memories, is when in 2013, I posted, how do you get on the first page of Google? So just for full context, I know exactly where you are if you were wondering, how do I get on the first page of Google? Because I was also there in 2013 asking the internet people the same thing. So SEO is simply having our website talk to Google and tell us what you do and who you serve, and then your location. So it really is just simply telling Google what we want Google to know about you. Because a lot of times people just assume, oh, Google already knows what I do. And the answer is no. We have to actually teach it, and we have to tell it, because it is technically just a computer somewhere. So the way that it works, so I think sometimes it's easier to talk about like, well, how does it learn? So the way it works is a searcher goes into Google or Bing, but we're going to just use Google for the most part today. And they ask a question, Alfredo recipe. That is simply a keyword. So the way it works is you type in your question. The search engine's job is to send results that it thinks are the most relevant and helpful. And the reason for that is if it's the most helpful, you will keep using Google. It's the reason why Google is so good at what it does, is because it's gotten really good at understanding keywords and repeating that information out. So the way that it works is search engines use these little bots, these little robots, and they come through every page of every website on the internet. They then go through and they pick apart different items, those different questions, those different keywords, and they kind of put them in a folder. They're like, okay, this person does photography. This person does wedding photography. This person is in Savannah. It kind of indexes all these little folders. So then when it's ready, when someone types in Savannah wedding photographer, it then goes through its folders and it says, these people have told me that they are a Savannah wedding photographer. Now, there's a few other things to keep in mind, of course, having reviews, and there's other things to boost that, but really that's just the bare bones of it. Our job is to convince Google that we are the most helpful, the most relevant, and the most impactful resource when someone types in that question. So it really comes down to keywords, which are simple questions, and Google reading them and saying, this is what I want you to see. And this is why it's so important to think about it as it needs to be done as a strategy. Because if you can't get found on Google, it's really hard for you to market your business. And that's simply because whenever you're thinking about marketing as a whole, because I get asked all the time as a marketing agency, okay, where do I start? And the answer is we're going to start with your website, because my job is to send people to your website. Your website is your salesperson. Like that is what you are paying me to do, is to get more website traffic to convert. So if we can get in front of Google more, that just gives us more options in the top of that funnel to then convert into a lead.
Yeah. When you explain it like that, it makes it just, it's so apparent like how important SEO is. And I think that a lot of people think like, oh, well, I have Instagram to get to, to market my business, or like, oh, I can just do a thing on The Knot or Wedding Wire or whatever. And then like SEO becomes an afterthought, or like, oh, I'll do that later. Like I'll get to that, once I like set my social media up. Like, I don't know. It seems like so often it's not the first top priority, and it like so should be. And so, yeah, hopefully, hope that people listen to this and go, oh my gosh, yeah, I need to go, need to work on that.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is really valuable, because one of the biggest myths I hear right now is that, well, I want to tap into the higher end luxury market. I'm using quotations because we all know that can mean a lot of things. But let's say you do want to attract couples spending 100, 150, 200,000 and up. They're still Googling. I'm not quite sure where this narrative that they only book referrals comes from, because it's something that we just statistically know isn't true. So there's a company called Think Splendid. Best insights out there. Every year, the first thing I do the minute I get the email that they have a new market report come out is I like grab my credit card and I buy it, because they are doing this research for us. And they have found that 73% of luxury wedding couples and 71% of ultra luxury, so guys, we're talking $500,000 and up, found at least one of their vendors from an internet search last year. Like, it is a statistical and utter fact that they are still Googling. So regardless of your price point, SEO is a very, very crucial element of your business.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've definitely heard that come up before. Like, oh yeah, luxury couples are just, they only get referrals from like their planner, whatever. Like they're not Googling, but like you said, there's actual data that says that they are Googling and they're finding their vendors that way. So that's super cool to think about. So my next question is, as far as SEO goes, is this something that we need to hire out right away? Or is there some part of this that a wedding pro, let's say a wedding photographer, planner, florist, like could they kind of DIY their SEO, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's just like anything. When you're first starting out, if you are brand new, you don't really have a marketing budget, you can DIY parts of it. It's just like anything. You can DIY a wedding, or you can hire a planner. Obviously, hiring an expert the first time can be helpful, but I also know that's not financially reasonable. So I have a few things I can share that are kind of the basics of what we should be doing. But my biggest note before I dive into the basics, because this is a big thing I see right now, is hiring just a website designer and expecting them to know SEO without them knowing SEO is a huge mistake. So one of the things we see is people go, oh, I already have a website, as if that has fixed the problem. But then there's no SEO. There's no header structure. Like, there's nothing actually telling Google what you do. So then the website really doesn't rank. So if you are someone and you're at that stage where you're like, I also want to hand off my website, because obviously your website and your SEO are kind of the same person. They're like married together. Make sure we have someone that is going to be doing the SEO for you, or that your designer is an expert. Because if not, you're going to spend a ton of money on a gorgeous website and be really sad in 6 months when you've gotten no leads from it. So my little note before I dive into the thoughts. So there's a few things. So the first thing we want to consider is what are called meta titles and descriptions. This is, again, one of those super basic bare bone things that we want to make sure your website has. One of the first things I look at. So this is something you're going to find in your backend, which I'll explain, but I want you to think of it this way. So think of your title as the storefront sign. It's that big sign. It's bringing in the things in the search results. So it needs to be attention grabbing, and it needs to be simple, because your meta title is short. It's about 60 characters. So we're talking keyword central only. So for example, wedding photographer in Houston, Houston wedding photographer, and then your brand name, and that's it. That's your meta title. And again, it might sound simple, but if you don't have that plugged into the back end of your website, Google's going to have to wing it and figure it out. And the last thing we want is Google to think you're the wrong thing. We have seen it so many times with website audits. The second one is called a meta description. So this is a little bit more in depth. So whenever you're Googling someone and you see on Google like a name with some text and then some smaller text underneath it, that's kind of a lighter gray. That's the meta title, is the big text. The little text is a description. Google reads that and knows what that is. So we need that to have keywords. So for example, we might use a bit more descriptive keywords, like maybe you're a film or hybrid wedding photographer. That's something that we might not always need in your title because, again, it's a descriptor. It's not the main thing we're focusing on. So that's where you would have a longer snippet of copy. So depending on your website platform, this is going to be hidden in a different spot. So whatever platform you're on, for example, if you're on Show It, you can just go to Show It's help desk and they'll literally show you exactly where you copy and paste this information. But that's going to be the first thing, is we want meta titles and descriptions as our least our minimum. The second thing we want to think about is actually header structure. This is one of the most overlooked, but is actually quite impactful. So Google reads your website in a specific order. It doesn't just like figure it out on its own. So it reads by your headers first. So what I mean by this is when you're in like the blog platform and it says like H1, H2, H3, that's a header. That's literally like a chapter. So Google is reading H1, H2, H3, H4, bullet point, like it has an order. So if we have a whole bunch of H1s and they have no keywords in them, we're literally telling Google a bunch of gibberish nonsense. Like sometimes we'll see it and like their headers are like family, love, happiness. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really tell Google anything about you. So the first thing is we want to make sure every page has just one H1. Think of it as the title of the book. This is super simple and sweet. Savannah Wedding Planner. Like very basic and very dry. So whenever we do copy and clients are like, why is this say it here? And I'm like, this is the most important piece of your website. All the other copy is not as important as this one little snippet, I promise. Then you can think of like H2s as like chapters. So what are other things like engagement photo session, photo album options, wedding day photography? Like think of it as like the H1 is telling it exactly what you do. And that's typically what we want to have high up on your website as well. Another big thing, and this has to do with both SEO and just usability, is how frustrating it is when you go to a website of a vendor and like you can't figure out what they do or where they're located. Because I think we forget that vendors all look the same. Seriously, like show someone outside of the industry a website and have them guess what kind of vendor they are. I do this test all the time when I'm doing a speaking engagement. I will throw up on the screen a website and people will guess what they are. Almost no one gets it right, or they're all three different options because we all look like we do flowers and photo at the same time. So anyway, just make it really clear it's for Google, but it's also for your people. And those are kind of the two biggest things that you can kind of focus on right now. Because the biggest thing is we don't want to like stuff a ton of keywords. Sometimes I see in the footer, people will have like a whole bunch of words like Charleston wedding photographer, Charleston gorgeous wedding photographer, best Charleston photographer. Guys, that doesn't work anymore. Google calls it, like Google knows it's spam. Google doesn't like it. So we kind of have to simplify it a bit more these days. But those are kind of a few things you can do right off the bat to at least try to help. And then the third one is to have a Google business listing if you're able to. That again is telling Google that you are a legitimate business, your website is linked to it, and it can really help kind of connect those dots for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Those were super, super good tips, and just interesting to think about like how, I don't know, I just always think it's interesting to think about how Google like reads how it, I don't know, how it reads our websites and how it like takes all the information. And it's just super fascinating. I don't get how it works at all, but like it does it, and it can help us or it can hurt us. So there's definitely a correct way to do things. And this is the information that we need.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I thought of another question as you were talking that is a little bit off topic, but it's something that I've seen come up actually quite a bit because I guess there was like, it's kind of been like a myth. So I'm hoping you can like bust the myth for us. But I had thought for a while that like there was a certain platform that was like a website, host or platform, I should say, that was like best for SEO. And I thought it was WordPress. But then I saw all these like things going around like, no, like it doesn't matter if it's WordPress. So can you just clarify that maybe? Like, is there one that's best for SEO or does it not matter? I would love any insight that you have on that.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of insight on this. So at the end of the day, anything can rank on Google. Like the platform isn't necessarily the negative side of it. The reason someone like us or any designer is going to lean towards specific platforms and why you're going to hear the same three over and over again is for a few reasons. It's easier in terms of we have more things we can do. For SEO, we can structure things a little bit easier. So for example, on Squarespace, the headers are a bit harder for us to visually make how you want it. It's always going to make H1 huge, even if I want it to be little visually. Little components like that. So it can still rank the same, but we might have to use custom coding to actually get to that next step. So again, not as like user-friendly. Or it becomes an issue of website speed. So the biggest issue we see when it comes to SEO sometimes is that the website might be ranking fine, but it is so slow that users are not using the website. So being found on Google and being clicked on is not the same as getting clients. That's another big myth is like, if you're on the first page of Google, you're killing it. Not necessarily. I've had plenty of inquiries come in that are on the first page of Google and there people are spending 3 seconds on the website and they're not converting. So those are two separate elements, which is why some platforms are frowned upon, is because they end up being slow, hard to use, very outdated, and in return, don't have great ROI. So for example, we don't love Wix, we don't love Weebly, we don't love GoDaddy, we don't love those type of builders. It has to do with the way they are built, it has to do with the coding structure, and it has to do with the fact that while I can get it to rank and get it SEO friendly, if you start adding a lot of blogs, or we start adding a lot of pictures, or we start wanting to do fun elements or add video, make it so bloated that it's too slow and the user experience is awful and you have people on for 30 seconds versus 2 minutes. So that's why you're going to hear people say like WordPress, show it as super hot. Squarespace, I know Webflow is a different one. That's why you're going to hear most designers work on that, is just because it also has to do with the user experience and the speed and the long-term value of that website versus just getting it ranked. I know that was kind of a long answer, but it's kind of a two-part answer. Like anything can rank, but it doesn't also mean that the website is converting.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. I was totally just curious, and that clears it up. So do you personally have a favorite that you like? Does Ava and the Bee do certain types of websites only, or like what's your preference?
So I am a Show It fan just because it is kind of like a complete sandbox Photoshop style. Like we can do anything almost, which is great. We do WordPress, Show It, and Squarespace. Those are the 3 main ones we work on. I personally love Show It. One of our team members is like, no, give me WordPress. And then we have another one who likes Squarespace. So it depends on kind of what you like. I have found Show It, though, allows us visually and design-wise to do the most without making it super bloated on the back end.
Interesting. Yeah. I've just always had WordPress, so I've never tried Show It, but I've heard like people who have Show It really seem to love it. And I've just heard a ton of great things about it, which has made me very curious, but it's just one of those things where it's like, I've just always, I did have Squarespace for a short time too. I actually, several years ago, so before I started my planning business, I had a wedding blog, and that was like my first introduction to the wedding industry. And so I had this wedding blog. And then when I started Event Crush, and that was on WordPress, and I did it under like the same account in WordPress, but then like my blog, I never updated all the plugins. And so because of that, I guess like hackers were able to get in. And so not only did they ruin my wedding blog that I had for years, they also like took down my whole business website. And so at the time, somebody recommended Squarespace because it was harder for like hackers to get into, maybe. I don't know. So I was like, okay, I'll try Squarespace, but personally didn't love it. I was not a fan. So as soon as I could switch back to WordPress, I did. I think I actually don't know, like how long has Show It been around? Has it been around for a while now?
So it was newer when I first got into Ava and the Bee, because I remember trying it for the first time, being like, what is this magic? So it's been around for at least 6 or 7 years. The reason why a lot of designers like show it is you get the power of a WordPress blog with a different user interface. So show it is technically built on a WordPress website, kind of technically.
Okay.
It just uses a different interface to show it. So your back end is always a WordPress for the blogging portion and the plugins. So that's usually why it's kind of been a cool compromise, is it gives you more visual options, but you can still blog. Like definitely for blogging, WordPress is the best in terms of like the options, the plugins, like hands down way better than any other one.
Cool. Well, that is good to know. For anyone out there I'm sure there's people who are thinking right now, like which website platform do I go with? It's nice to know the pros and cons and different options and everything. Yeah. Awesome. So, okay. So obviously we're talking about SEO for websites and Google and how important this all is, but do you think, should wedding pros also be focusing on SEO for like social media too? I mean, is that a thing? Like social media for, SEO for Instagram? Like, is that a thing too that people should be focusing on, or should really the priority just be SEO in terms of like coming up in Google searches?
So this is actually really interesting timing of this. So without diving too deep into the weeds, Google came out with an update in March, which is kind of shifting how they're searching for items. So if you've been using Google recently, which I'm assuming everybody has, you'll see that some social media platforms are coming up higher. Like Reddit is super huge. Reddit and Quora, everyone's like, why is this 15 years old? It has to do with some updates. It has to do with how Google is considering what is a robot and not a robot. Because we have to remember we're in an age where Google is like, oh my gosh, the internet is 700 fake websites with AI. So like, long story short, in the future, will it be a bit more? Yes. For now, the biggest thing is that SEO is really mostly in terms of how it works with Google on your website. And then Instagram has its own like internal search version, and TikTok has its own internal search version. Like we're seeing statistically that couples are using TikTok like a search engine. It's really shifting, again, the narrative. Is it technically a search engine like Google? No, but it's being used the same. So for example, on Instagram, like have your location and what you do in your name or in your bio, because it is searchable. Not necessarily like it can come up on Google. It's not necessarily more likely, but it can. Another thing is Pinterest is technically an SEO-based platform. So that's the reason Pinterest comes up so high in image searches. So if you're using Pinterest, then yes, you would use it like a Google strategy. Same with YouTube, because YouTube is owned by Google and it's built like a search engine. So in some aspects, yes, it just depends on the platform. But really, at the end of the day, the same idea of keywords and search applies regardless of whether it's Google or not. People are just searching for basic things. Like on Pinterest, they're searching for basic terms. On Instagram, they're searching for basic terms. So as long as you have an idea of what those basic terms are for your business, you can kind of use them interchangeably throughout like other platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so kind of winding down on my questions here. What would you say is, or what would your biggest piece of advice be to somebody who really hasn't done much with SEO, isn't ranking on Google at all, like they're clicking through all the pages and they're not coming up and they really want to get on that first page of Google? Like, do you have just anything else that you would share that could help that person?
Yeah, I have a few small things. The first is to make sure your mobile view is working well. So mobile view is often overlooked, but Google actually has a mobile first approach. It means it is prioritizing usability on a mobile device when searching. So first thing is make sure your mobile view actually works. You'd be surprised how many websites don't work on mobile still. The second one is to really make sure that you get Google Analytics. So the biggest thing when people ask me, like, how do I know it's working? Well, I don't know unless I look at your data, which means you definitely don't know unless you're looking at your data. So get yourself comfortable with something like Google Analytics. It is free. You attach it to your website. I know at first, trust me, it is so overwhelming. I have a whole workshop on it that's like an hour long, and it goes over the basics because I know how overwhelming it is. But I promise, even just understanding basic metrics, like how many people visit your website from Google, is information that you need to know, because how else are you supposed to be able to make a strategy or get found on Google if you don't even know what Google is looking for? So Google Analytics is that. And then the third thing is just to understand that it is a marathon, not a sprint. There is no first page of Google overnight unless you're paying a ton of money in ads. It doesn't exist. I know there are SEO gurus who try to sell this potion, and we have clients who tried to buy that potion and it turned out that potion's not real, because it's not. There is no, like, I can guarantee first page of Google next week. Like, it's literally not possible. There's no way for anyone to actually technically guarantee that. So it does take time, which is why having maybe a blogging strategy can help with that marathon, because it's not just dumping keywords today and acting like it's going to work. Google is going to be like, well, you haven't updated your website in 6 years. How? You're not an authority anymore. Blogging can help, because you can be telling Google, hey, I'm updating my website a few times a month. Like, we consider blogging, so much of it is just an SEO strategy. I just want Google to understand you exist.
Yeah, definitely. Those were great pieces of advice. I love that you mentioned the Google Analytics too. I had Google Analytics and it like disconnected at some point, and I haven't like reconnected it. I just have whatever like WordPress has built in for, so I do see like, I have something, but it's not Google Analytics, and I really need to get it reconnected. It's been like one of those things on the list that I just keep putting off. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that next week, but this is the reminder that I needed to just do it.
Yeah, Google sunsetted the old version last summer. So when it sunsetted, that's why it's Google.
That's why.
It's GA4. Yeah, it's a whole new type. It's a whole new platform, kind of, in a way. Like, it got rid of the old one and it's new now.
Okay. Yeah. Because one day I just realized I like didn't have it, and I was like, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Okay. So can you just share a little bit more about what you do? Like, what are the services that you offer to wedding professionals, and like what are people coming to you asking for help with? Like, obviously you do websites, and do you do like full branding? Like, tell me more about what you guys offer, because it seems like a lot.
We do honestly everything at this point. So we do full marketing. So that includes everything that you might need monthly, like blogging, Pinterest, newsletters, Instagram, social media content. So we have clients that are in monthly marketing where they don't touch their marketing because they don't have to. We also offer everything from funnel build outs. So launch strategy, funnel build outs, full strategy, and copywriting, branding, website design, SEO. Pretty much what I tell people is the only things I don't do is PR. I don't do ads, and I don't do TikTok, but literally everything else we do for your business. A lot of options to support people.
That's amazing. And you started it more as like a VA originally, and then grew it into all of that.
Yeah, I started as just me. And now we have a team of 4, about to hire another employee in the next month. So that's how we're able to do so much, as we have a team who are all wedding experts and are able to serve you guys.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh. I love hearing it. Super cool. So, okay. So if I have any listeners who are like, oh my gosh, I need to reach out to Adrienna and her team to get some help, where can they find you, and what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can come find us at avaandthebee.com. Just fill out our contact form. It has some really good questions that help me understand how we can serve you. Or hang out with us in the DMs at Ava and the Bee. I also love to answer any and all marketing questions y'all have. It's my favorite thing in the world, is to be able to solve a puzzle for you guys. I love it. Give me your hardest puzzle and I will solve it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, this was such a great conversation. Thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. And I know I mentioned this before, but I would love to have you back on again sometime to like go a little deeper into all of this. Or I know there's a lot of topics that you can talk about. So I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. So much to talk about.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Event Crushed podcast. I hope you found value in this episode, and if you did, please consider sharing it with a wedding industry friend. We also hope you'll consider leaving a rating or review for the show to help other listeners find it. This podcast is edited and produced by Ace Sound Design. If you're looking to elevate your audio experience, their info can be found in the show description. As always, thank you for listening, and please connect with us on Instagram if you haven't already. Now, get out there and crush it.